Hi guys and welcome to Type 40.
Yeah, in the here and now, everything that was old is sort of new again. Doctor Who hasn't exactly gone back to factory settings after all, but we have got one Doctor, one companion, and we do have a diamond, the diamond logo, albeit with a bit of a tune-up. This is a very much design classic, updated for the 21st century. But I think really you still can't beat the original. And when this is seen to loom at one from the original sort of diamond vortex there that was first glimpsed in 1973, 74, this still gives me chills. Really takes me back to a very precise time in my own childhood. I was very, very small, in the dead of the classic series, about in the middle of it all there, the classic series that ran for 26 years, 9 producers. Philip Hinchcliffe, he was producer of Doctor Who from 1974 right through to 1977, so he was the 7th producer of the classic show. 70 episodes across those first 3 seasons of Tom Baker's tenure as the Doctor. Quite a figure. Just the name. You don't even need the Philip, do you, Simon? It's Hinchcliffe. The Hinchcliffe era. And with all due respect to Doctor Who producers past, or directors, or anybody else, usually when we denote something by era, we talk about doctors, don't we? But for some producers, it just seems apt, doesn't it? And the Hinchcliffe era is absolutely a thing, isn't it?
Oh, is it a thing? Boy, is it a thing! Yeah, it's and it stands really head and shoulders above anything that went before or since, because this was the absolute golden era of Doctor Who. Both critically and also ratings wise. You know, the ratings were never better before or since the Philip Hinchcliffe era. Those 3 years, the ratings, the average of those ratings was all sort of about 10 million. I mean, it's just amazing by today's standards, or even by standards then. It's just amazing.
Earlier on, we talked about Are You Being Served? Gets a third mention. Earlier on, we talked about Are You Being Served in the mid-70s. But in all seriousness, that time, whether we're talking about sitcoms, chat shows, dramas, film drama series, or family shows like Doctor Who and Basil Brush and things like that, or game shows even, The Generation Game, The Golden Shot, all those things, it's still referred to as the golden age of TV. Are you old enough to remember that clearly, Simon? Do you think this is a mythology now that's been labelled on a bit thick, or was this really the golden age of TV?
No. It hasn't been labelled on thick at all. This really was the golden era of Doctor Who. Coincidentally, fell within the golden era of television. Full stop. That's not to take anything away from Philip Hinchcliffe at all. It's not like that he fell lucky and fell in the golden era, and that's why Doctor Who had its golden period. No, that is clearly to do with Philip Hinchcliffe. But it's just beautifully coincidental that the era of Doctor Who just happened to fall within the best era of television, and those late 70s. The latter half of the 70s through into the first part of the 80s is genuinely it's the best television, and it was, and we knew it at the time that we were getting absolute gold, and so do you think it's not overstated at all.
Do you think it's because partly it was far enough into the history of television as a medium that it had become part of the family, and it was starting to creatively sort of grow and gather pace and sort of push out its boundaries, but it hadn't been around long enough to become overly corrupted, cynical, too corporate, and too complacent?
I guess so. It had just come out of it had finally sort of broken out of the era that ran up to sort of the mid-70s, where people were still talking very loudly as though they were still on stage. It was still at that point up until the mid-70s. It was like filmed theatre. That's how it was, and everyone was still projecting to the back row. Whereas by the mid 70s onwards, they got it. They understood the medium of television, and at that point, the production teams that were making it were just on the top of their game. They understood how to do it. So I think it's more to do with the quality of the work that was being done, rather than that the people were assuming it was. The people were assuming it was part of the fact because it was so good at that particular time. I think
it must have been exciting, and it must have been, I don't know if nerve-wracking is the right word, Shaw, but to have this new medium and to have it sort of, nobody really knows where it's going to go, and it seems to be reaching more and more people all the time, and it's the same all over the world. Like, different creative things are happening, and lots of shows are getting exported here and there. You can see why people sort of gravitated towards it, that maybe weren't necessarily people who had previously wanted to work in something like theatre. I mean, Philip Hinchcliffe, for example, he was an English literature graduate, and he originally worked for a travel company, and then as a teacher before becoming a script editor at the Associated Television Company, that was part of the ITV network, so it's based in the Midlands, and he spent an extensive time there working with writers on scripts for a number of shows, different kinds of shows, and just making connections, I suppose, by modern standards, and just gaining experience, working his way up to be an associate producer when he was really quite young. And it was only in 1974 that he joined the BBC. He was kind of courted by this guy, William Slater, who offered him pretty much outright the job of producing Doctor Who, which by that point had been on TV for 10, 11 years. Hinchcliffe himself was in his 20s. So what a job to... Okay, he clearly worked for it, Shaw, but to be of that age and get a gig that's that significant, and just like Simon was saying, was a proper jewel in the crown of the biggest night on British TV when TV was booming. A lot of people might have been too daunted to take that job, I think, Shaw. I mean, what do you think?
I would be too. I didn't realize he was that young, and I feel like that would have been really tough, because not a lot of people are gonna, what's the word? Not trust, but do you know what I mean? Like, respect.
Have faith, yeah.
Have faith, yeah, exactly. I mean, he's done half the things that I've done, but I'm not a producer, so I feel like I've still got hope to be able to do something like that. But no, that's awesome. I did not know he was that young. But anyone who can put his name on Genesis of the Daleks is always got a. It's always going to have a special place, if that's true. I think it was Philip Hinchcliffe. Was that Genesis of the Daleks?
Yeah.
Him? Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
And what a lovely man he was as well. Very polite. You wouldn't, if you just saw him walking around, you would not think that he was responsible for the biggest era in television. So yeah, mad respect. I did not know about ATV though. It was Granada when it was in my era, if you like.
It's interesting, because when I was lucky enough to bump into Philip Hinchcliffe very briefly at Hooverville just recently, in Derby a couple of months ago, I was lucky enough to bump into him, and I just took the opportunity and I just said, thank you, Philip. Seriously, your Doctor Who was the best Doctor Who it had ever been. And it was really interesting. He said, he put me on the spot, actually. He sort of said to me, "Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that is?" And it was really it was a really interesting reaction. What he didn't say, which you would expect him to say, was, "Oh, thank you very much. That's really kind of you. Well, we did our..." No, he's very, very humble. He's very self-effacing. He just took it at face value. It matter of fact that I was telling him he produced the best Doctor Who of all time, which I do genuinely believe. And he just threw it right back at me and said, "Why do you think that was?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. It was just brilliant. How do you begin to do? Look, we've said before now, Doctor Who was lightning in a bottle. But the Hinchcliffe era was lightning within the lightning in a bottle. That's how I see it. He just absolutely nailed it. He nailed it. And I can't tell you how, because if we knew how, lots more people would have done it.
Do you think he was being playful when he asked you that question?
Do you think he was being what? Sorry, Dan?
Because you can't have been the first person.
No.
You can't have been the first person who ever said that to him.
I think he actually genuinely was intrigued. I think he actually wanted to know Why do because it's difficult for you.
He wants to know what you thought.
Yeah,
your perception.
How he just did what he thought was the right thing, and so how he doesn't know what it was that he did that was right. So I think he's probably genuinely interested to know from fans, why do they rate his era so highly? What was it that he did right? He probably needs to understand that a little bit for his own purposes.
You could say that some of the stars aligned. And Hinchcliffe didn't cast Tom Baker. Barry Letts cast Tom Baker, didn't he? And Tom Baker, obviously, I don't think anybody would argue that if he's not still the most successful, most recognisable Doctor, he's certainly one of two. So that wasn't down to Hinchcliffe, but it could have still so easily have gone wrong after that. He didn't even produce Tom's first story, Robot, did he? He came in with The Ark in Space, the very next one, which is, I suppose, that's why Robot kind of feels like it's a bit of a hangover from the Pertwee era, because in most respects, apart from Tom himself, it was. So the Hinchcliffe era properly starts with The Ark in Space, doesn't it?
I think with Tom, I think the best, whether they're producer or writer, whatever credit they've got that they're responsible for writing the Doctor of that period, whoever can sort of look at an actor and tap into something really unique to that actor and then write around that. And I feel like Hinchcliffe, as soon as he either obviously watched Tom or spoke to Tom, whatever he did, he very easily got that in Tom's Doctor, there's that essence of dark. There's that sort of essence of something scary, something otherworldly, something that sort of ominous. He sort of got that about Tom and then wrote around that in the best way. I think when you look at those stories with Tom and Philip's writing it, he's exploring, I feel like, Tom's sort of morality as a Doctor in times, his darkness at times, and how he sort of works and how he's that alien figure. And I think Hinchcliffe just got that and ran with it with Tom, and that's what made Tom look such an incredible Doctor on screen.
I suppose that one of the many qualities that a good producer's going to need to have to keep a show like Doctor Who on the rails, particularly after like 10 years, when again complacency, you'd have forgiven the audience for becoming complacent. Oh, there's another actor gone. You know what? I think I'll skip this one. Oh, and it's gone on. They've already had 3. Do they really need another? You can imagine that may have happened back then, but no, he just got right down to work. He was partnered up with Robert Holmes, who'd been writing on Doctor Who for, at that point, since 68, so good 6 or 7 years, and heaven knows how many other shows. So the experience that you could say Hinchcliffe hadn't got, Holmes had. And so just like the previous incumbents, Terence Dix and Barry Letts, Hinchcliffe and Holmes seem to strike up another golden partnership, Matt. It's you just have to read down a list of the stories. It's like banger after banger after banger after banger.
The thing is, like, this is, even though this was in the late 70s, this is my era. Like, when it was shown here, it was in the late 70s. So, and it's just like every single one, even the ones that everybody despises, like, as you know, I'm a huge fan of the Android Invasion. As far as I'm concerned, that one in itself is the reason why.
I didn't know that, but I love it too.
Oh. No, it's the one that got me into Doctor Who, like, as a major in a major way.
Wow.
And so every time I hear people always diss it and that sort of thing, it's like, you know, the fact that he would get Terry Nation to do another story that wasn't a Dalek story, for goodness sake. It was something completely different, and I just love that. And it's also the fact that you could see with Holmes and that they loved sort of like having taking a story and then making it into what would happen if this happened in the Doctor Who universe. You had Frankenstein with the brain of Morbius. You had Seeds of Doom with, you know, the thing from another world, you know, and every single one just bang on. You know, it's just it. This is the one lot of Blu-ray set I've been waiting for, and they know that they've got a good set here, and they're just letting us wait and wait and wait, and it's
there's a cheekiness.
agonizing.
There's a cheekiness, Matt, to looking at a show like Doctor Who, thinking, okay, how many episodes we've got to make this year? We've got this. How many serials are we going to commission? Okay, which movies can we possibly look at to repurpose, rejig, and to sort of move the furniture around a little and offer it to a younger audience? In some ways, it seems very, very cheeky, but it's actually quite inspired, I feel.
I think it's skill at the end of the day, because anybody who's watched a lot of movies or read a lot of books, especially with the Gothic influences, I love Gothic books, Dracula, Frankenstein, those sort of things.
Yeah.
And as soon as you've read those books, you watch one of those stories and you know exactly where the inspiration is. But not once do you feel like they're cheating, like they're just copying somebody else's work, which is such a hard feat, because the atmosphere comes from those worlds. Or when he's clearly having the idea of Holmes when it comes to Talons.
Yeah.
But the fact that what he could do was take the spirit of those things and, like you said, translate into, now we're in Doctor Who world, and now I've got these characters. They're going to work differently, but the trappings and the costumes and some of the sets are very clearly from something else. But it just merged.
I think what they did very cleverly, Charlotte, is that they took touchstones that everybody understood, such as Holmes, such as Frankenstein. Of course, they were going to, the thing from another world, as Matt says. They took those touchstones that we know and we recognise, those sort of tropes that we know and we understand and we like, and then they span them. So that's why you're right, Charlotte. You don't ever feel cheated that they've just ripped off. Undoubtedly, pretty much every single story through the Hinchcliffe-Holmes era. There we are. That one's, they've borrowed from The Mummy for that one, for Pyramids. Every story throughout this era is borrowed from something somewhere. The cornerstone of it is borrowed from something, but you never ever feel that they're ripping you off and they're just churning out a rip-off.
What's odd? Sorry.
No, go for it,
what's odd is the fact that you think that they're ripping off that, but but you think that Frankenstein and all that ripped off
something else.
Who? This is what I thought for years when I saw Brain and Morpheus and that. And I saw Frankenstein, a true story, and that sort of thing. I was like,
Matt,
is
it like hearing a song and not realizing that it's a cover version, and then you hear the original years later, and you think, I didn't know they did that first.
Yeah, it's just well done,
I think the thing is, you either don't notice that they've kind of ripped off, in inverted commas, an original concept such as Frankenstein, Dracula, The Mummy, whatever it might be. You either don't realise, or you do just sort of clock it, and you just like the fact that you can recognise, I can see what the core of the idea was here. And so because you're able to recognise that, it then gives you a sense of satisfaction. But because they do something so different with it, the Brain of Morbius is not Frankenstein. It simply isn't. But does it borrow lots from Frankenstein? Yes, it does. But you just don't feel that they've just stolen stuff and ripped it off. It's really cleverly done.
It's like Time Lord Boy says here in the live chat, they're Gothic stylings.
Yeah.
It's a shorthand that gets us to the place we need to be at within. Let's say it's easy to forget these things. You couldn't binge watch a story in one night at this time, Shah. You got your fix of Doctor Who for 23 minutes on a Saturday. They've got to take you to that place right away. Hit you with 20-odd minutes worth of real flavour of whatever it is they were trying to sort of waft under your nose, wherever they were going to take you, and leave you wanting more for a full 7 days. So there's an economy, a necessary economy to that. And to do it effectively in the way that they did year after year after year through that time, it's incredible. And you read through a list of the stories, Sean, it's like, it doesn't even bear debate. It's like each of them is a standout classic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, well, more than you guys, recent to watching classic, and I have got to these ones, and these are even classic stories, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
The ones that you've all just like completely like rifted off. All of them are amazing. I'm such a big fan. I think they should actually go back to that serialized set of doing stories that in that way keep me invested. If I'm zoning out at 40 minutes or 30 minutes, that's not going to do, and I do have a very short attention span. But when it comes to this, I think it's 10% luck, but then everything came with it: the casting, the scripts, the stories, the scariness, the touches, the design, even the cheap effects. I mean, you know, robot, I know that wasn't him, but that sort of style. And because I can even forgive it, and I'm very, very particular about what I like, because I can forgive it, it just shows that it still stands the test of time even today. And I think that must have been difficult at the time, and in 2024 even more so.
And it's odd, you know, Shah, because you look down the list of stories and you write down, there isn't a single one in there in that run of stories from Hinchcliffe and Holmes. There isn't a single one that stands out. You say, yeah, but that's not so good, is it? Just not. There's not.
I mean,
one.
Simon, there are some that I like better than others, and I'll be honest, there's a couple that I'm not that keen on. But when I watch them, I'm always impressed with what they're trying to do and the bases that they're hitting. I can't deny they're successful in everything that they're endeavouring to do, and that's a rare thing with any TV show, let alone something that ran for 26 years and something that was 10 years old at this point.
I think as well.
Go on, Charlotte.
I think some of that as well, and people in the chat are talking about the cliffhangers. Whenever the Doctor is in one of these stories of this era, you generally feel at times they're the most at risk that any Doctor's been before or after them, honestly. Yeah. I remember when I first watched Pyramids, I was actually scared for the Doctor when he got captured by Sutekh. When Sutekh basically had him frozen. You're so used to the Doctor almost. Classic, this wasn't as much of a sin, I'll happily admit that, but it still had that at times of the Doctor's going to be okay. The Doctor's going to breeze through. The Doctor's going to think his way out of this. And then you get to some of these stories and you just think, God, how is the Doctor going to get out of this? Like, you were questioning that.
Yeah, because there's not an ex machina. There's not
exactly.
The sonic screwdriver is going to fix everything, and heal the world, and solve every world problem. It was a genuine. There was a cleverness to it that just is so lacking. Has been. I would even argue, even though I'm a huge fan, obviously, of the revived series 2005. That was a big problem. It was like Screwdriver will sort this out, but to have a clever way of getting out of things, like in Brain of Morbius or like Genesis of the Daleks, that I know it's such a classic one and what everyone goes to, but even that touch these two wires together and you can see the internal struggle, and that is purely the Doctor having to try and figure a way out of doing what he should or shouldn't do. Like I said, there's a cleverness to it which is such a classic and exciting way to get people engaged, and it just doesn't have this now. I want it back, and I wasn't even alive at the time, and I want it back. So what does that tell you?
When I watch these stories back again, I'm also struck by the relationship between the Doctor and the companion, because although there was undoubted closeness in the earlier eras, and particularly the Pertwee era, I suppose. It seemed to add another layer to it with the Tom Baker era and the character of Sarah Jane Smith with Tom. The way that this evolved, as they seem to be equals, probably for the first time, whereas in the Pertwee era, I've always felt that even when the Doctor's working alongside Liz Shaw, and you can see that he respects her. But they don't. There's still. I still always feel there's a bit of a pecking order, and there's the Doctor and the assistant sort of vibe to it. But I think that I get a different feeling from as soon as Hinchcliffe takes over. Basically, the Doctor is with is with friends. And he may be cleverer than all of them, but that's not the end of the story. That's not all there is to this dynamic, to these connections. I think it evolves. The series evolves in that respect in a way. Whether was it overdue at that point, I don't know, because I wasn't around. I don't know what I would have been hungering for as an audience member. I actually think it was probably quite prescient, if anything, probably a little bit before its time.
Possibly.
I think the thing is with this particular era, what they do with it is quite clever in that they're not afraid to make it quite, well, very dark. It is very dark. The Doctor himself is very dark. I mean, that confrontation that you're just talking about, Shah, the confrontation between the Doctor and Sutekh. Sorry, Charlotte, I think you mentioned it.
Yeah, Charlotte.
There is nothing darker than that scene in Doctor Who. You are right, Charlotte. The Doctor is pretty much he is on his knees. He's literally brought to his knees. There's nothing darker than that. And
see,
likewise,
because Simon, because we're not privy to his thoughts, he's got to share them with somebody. So when he shares them with Sarah or Harry or Leela or
but likewise, what's interesting is even the relationship between them is quite dark. Of course, it's in Pyramids of Mars that he is so offhand about the people that are being killed, and Sarah is horrified, and he says, "I'm not human." And so it's interesting. You can to later versions of Doctor Who, in particular the current era, where the Doctor just wants to be everybody's best friend and wants to be liked by the entire universe. And this Doctor really just doesn't care. He doesn't care. He's out. He's there to do a job, and he doesn't care if he's going to fall out with people as a result of it, because the job is more important.
I think, and there is where lies real drama.
Yes.
I don't think it's very evident that the show was getting darker and more gothic, but it was actually getting more dramatic as well. And I don't mean that as a slight on Letts or Dix or Pertwee or anybody.
Can I say for me, this is Doctor Who at its most frightening.
Yes.
And that is the reason why I remember it so vividly as a 3 or 4 year old,
That's why I got into it, Matt, because I was scared.
Yeah, and it's not just that, but like Charlotte said, with the cliffhangers and everything like that, there are just indelible imprints in your mind that you're like, I need to see what happens next. And the fact that these are continuing stories, and you're not going to find out straight away what happens, and so they get you invested in the story, and unfortunately there's a lot not happening today with that.
What happened, Matt, was by this point in the show's history, Doctor Who had always been set out since 1963 to be a drama series in which there was threat and danger. And, you look at the William Hartnell years, and they spend sort of 3 years in danger of not getting back to the ship, of the ship being gone, of them being stranded. There was always danger. Now, I think by this point in the show's history, they'd actually got their act together. They'd crystallized it down. They understood the show had been going 10, 11, 12 years at that point. And they understood Hinchcliffe came along at a point where they crystallized it. They understood what they were doing to make it frightening. And that's why the Hinchcliffe is so frightening. And because Hinchcliffe and Holmes leaned into that, as opposed to away from it, they ran with it. They ran with the fact that, okay, we've got it now. We know what it is that makes Doctor Who frightening. We know how far we can go and how much the kids will take and love.
Yes.
And they ran with it. And that's why
just do it. They do it again and do it again and again and again and again and again. 70 episodes.
One after the other, after the other, after the other. Everyone, they were just on a roll by that point because they knew it and they knew what worked. And of course, it's debatable whether they went too far with the Deadly Assassin. I would argue 100% that they didn't go too far with the deadly assassin. But at that point, no, they were just on a roll, as you say, Dan, one after the other. Just keep them coming. Just keep the shots and the thrills coming.
I don't know. It seems cruel, doesn't it, to sort of on a celebration for the man's 80th birthday to harken on what sort of undid it. Or there's no weak link in the Hinchcliffe era, according to Adam there in the live chat on YouTube there. And we've got a comment here from Daryl Joyce as well, who says Hinchcliffe and Holmes understood what drew kids in more than Mary Whitehouse ever could. Of course, they're talking about...
Completely misunderstood, Daryl. You're correct. Completely misunderstood.
Mary Whitehouse was the head
to save us
of
from
the
something
viewers.
that we didn't need saving from.
Yeah, she just, for the people who don't know, the people who don't remember Mrs. Mary Whitehouse, she was the head of the National Viewers and Listeners Association, which all these decades on has become Ofcom. So this is the lady that, she looks like quite a kindly faced old woman. And she was a bit of a laugh sometimes on TV. But my God, did she have the knives out for Doctor Who. Charlotte?
I was going to say, I think also to connect to that idea of being scared, it feels like in this era, they actually said, you know what? We're going to tackle quite grown-up issues. We're going to tackle quite highbrow things that even adult shows would have struggled with. The idea of genocide and what the whole idea of what the Daleks represented when we first saw them and the connections with the historical implications there. And this idea of, I feel like in this era, there was this idea of cost, whether that's what the Doctor had to lose or somebody else had to lose or what Sarah Jane had to witness with Genesis. You can see her having to see the Daleks and what they are, and seeing the Doctor get pushed to that brink, that moment when he's saying, do I have the right? It's all about how much you can almost lose. And I think that's such an important thing. When written correctly, when it's written cleverly, of course you should put that in stuff which some people would say, no, it's a kid's show, it's a family show. But if you do it with enough subtlety, if you do it with allegory, if you do it because you think, no, this is important and this needs to be discussed, that's what I love about this era as well. With so many of these stories, there's topics that you think, oh, that's quite close to the bone, even going near that, let alone how close they got to some of these topics.
Yeah, there's deep stuff in there, Charlotte. You're right. There's really hard-hitting stuff. And the thing is, with this era, it is just pure drama. And of course, this is what the BBC did best. It is pure drama. There's no comedy in there. There's no temptation. There's no nervousness on the part of the production team to think, oh, this is getting a little bit dark. We need to throw in a comedy character here. We need to throw in some comical lines.
There's no Strax in this, is there?
There's correct. There was no Drax in it. There was no temptation to do that. They were not afraid. They were focused with laser precision to know exactly what they were doing, and they were going to do it. And you either went along with the ride or you were left behind. And of course, everybody went along with the ride. They got it right. It's as simple as that. So there was never any nervousness to make them think, we've got to lighten this. It's too much.
Was that bravado? Was that bravery?
Confidence.
I think it was or recklessness on Hinchcliffe's part.
I honestly think it was just confidence that he knew what he was doing, and so did Holmes. They just knew what they were doing in their heart.
Because they trusted one another implicitly, didn't they, according to the interviews and things that we have got.
Yeah. And of course, what you've got to bear in mind is when season 12 started, their first season, by the second story, they were already up to about 10, 11, 12 million viewers. So I know, Shah, it is literally incredible. Now, what I think that did, because I know Philip Hinchcliffe has gone on record as saying, he went into the production office on the day, I think, of about episode 2 or 3 of The Ark in Space and said, wow, we've done it, folks. We've cracked it. We're doing it. Now, that must have given him and the rest of the production team so much confidence very early on that they probably just thought, I don't know whether there was fear of variating from what they cracked as a formula, or whether it was just confidence at that point to just think, no, we know what we're doing. Just stay on target and just keep on doing what we're doing, because they proved so early on that it worked and people loved it.
Mm-hmm. It's
Mark
confidence
Milford.
without ego, isn't it?
Yes.
I
Oh,
think
no
that's what
ego.
it is, yeah.
You're right,
Yeah,
Sean.
yeah, it's a-
No
Yeah,
ego.
it's a good combo. It's a great combo.
No,
Well,
a
again, I
crucial
think it comes
distinction, I
back to what-
suppose.
I think
And when
it
you're
goes back
talking
to
about them using public money as well, you can't have. This is why modern television. I know this isn't exclusive to the modern BBC, but ego seems to come into it so clearly and actually marketed as such as well. It's as if it's to be celebrated now, which you're quite right, Shah. There was no ego in the equation here. We've got a comment from Mark Milford who describes it as a perfect storm of producers, actors, production values, world building and style. And Domgo
That's
says
nail
it's
on the head,
simply
isn't it?
it's never been bettered according to Domgo. There, Cliff Maxwell says it's not really a question of ripping off as much as the story cores were archetypal and culturally they were deeper in terms of symbols and concepts that humans identify with from myth.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Absolutely. And to be clear, it wasn't, you can't even look at those stories and say they were homages, because that's what always happens. If somebody's accused of ripping off, they just say, no, it's an homage. No, they're not even homages. They take they just take a principle, an idea, a concept, a theme, and they extrapolate and run with that. It's not an homage. They're not rip-offs.
I mean, for God's sake, what on earth are you going to be ripping off with the Zygons? Let's be fair. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before.
Spot on.
So that's well. In fact, let's not look at that image too much. I guess.
Several spots on. Yeah, it's the invasion of the body snatchers, isn't it? It's but made more visually kind of appealing for
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
It's that simple. Andrew Gareth Dick is in the live chat here on YouTube and says, "Is there any other genre that Doctor Who works so well with, other than science fiction?" Than horror, and the Philip Hinchcliffe era proved that.
Yeah,
Alive as Flame misses the cliffhangers. Well, yeah, that's the cornerstone of all of classic Doctor Who. But again, I do think that the cliffhangers were handled better than ever before or after in the Hinchcliffe era.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's right what Charlotte was saying earlier on. I remember as a kid, just my heart was thumping as we were getting closer towards the end of the episode, and you knew that the Doctor or Sarah was going to be in danger. And it was this era. My heart was literally thumping out of its chest. I remember it really clearly.
Yeah, it's not just the cliffhangers for me though. It's how you get out of it. Like I said, I'm not a fan of Ex Machina. I'm not a writer though, so I'm not going to claim that I would do any better. But you can have an incredible cliffhanger. Like you can have one. I'm just going to pick literally one out of the air. From Revived, probably Rise of Cybermen, when they're all surrounded.
Yeah.
And you think, holy Christ, how are they going to get out of this one? And then, or you'd go to the other one with the fake regeneration at the end of Stolen Earth.
Which one?
Ones where you think,
that's
oh
my question.
God, exactly. But that was the first time it ever happened. So it was like, oh my God, what is going to happen kind of thing? How are they going to get out of this? Because you always know that they're going to, but how? Or if I was even going to go to another one, when the Daleks come out of the sphere, and Charlotte, you probably had exactly the same thing as mine, because that was our first experience of being terrified of those things. And just thinking, how are you going to get out of that one as well? Like I love a cliffhanger, but for some reason, and especially in the new ones, now that I've experienced classic, it just tends to miss the mark on how they get out of it. There was, like I said, there was just a better way of doing it in the Hinchcliffe era. And Holmes, I'm not going to...
Maybe it was just discipline. Sure, maybe just knowing they got it nailed down. Robert Holmes wasn't somebody who'd grown up wanting to write Doctor Who. He wanted to write. He would write absolutely anything that was any commission that he got and try and write to the best of his ability. He wasn't a fan of this show. He was somebody who, like Malcolm Hawke and that whole generation of people, and probably the generation that came afterwards as well, come to think of it, they wanted to write, and they wanted to get better and better and better at it, to write to purpose, write to order, to put food on the table, if you want to look at it.
That's
coldly.
Yeah, we all go to work for the same reason. Like, why would that be any different?
Darren Bradley in the live chat says, you could say The Deadly Assassin would also eventually give us some film classics. I think he's pointing to an influence on A Nightmare on Elm Street and The Matrix there with The Deadly Assassin. And you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if the makers of those films had seen these Doctor Who's, because they were shown on repeat, weren't they, on those PBS stations? We hear the story all the time. This era was very much the bulk of that package, wasn't it? The initial package that
Absolutely.
sold Doctor Who into that world at that time of night, that a whole generation of Doctor Who fans on the other side of the Atlantic, they flocked to it and made it a sort of appointment of view in a kind of geeky way. It's the world building that Time Lord Boy was talking about earlier on.
Yeah.
World building is never better than in this particular era of Doctor Who, and that's because Robert Holmes was the absolute master at world building. With one deft line, Robert Holmes could literally create an entire world. I still talk about that famous line in the Tunnels of Weng Chiang when the Doctor says he was with the Reykjavik army in what was it, the Icelandic army at the final advance on Reykjavik. I mean, it just makes you, what is he talking about? I don't know, but it doesn't matter because it just gets the imagination going. And Corvin chat, going back to the Deadly Assassin, makes a really good point, which is correct, that the Deadly Assassin is arguably the first time we ever see a virtual reality environment in any form of media. There is an argument for that, and it's called The Matrix, as we've just said, and of course the Matrix film comes along many years later. But yeah, I cannot remember an example of a virtual reality environment really prior to the Deadly Assassin. So they were creating genres here without even knowing that they were, because even though
it's quite a trippy kind of quality that those scenes have got, they're not hallucinations. It's not some sort of flower power thing. No. It's close to it's a harder sci-fi.
Oh yeah, because it's real and it's
had
happening,
battles
and
of the mind,
Doctor is in danger.
Matt?
Pertwee's era had like a lot of battles of the mind. Like he would be, there was quite a couple of things where he was fighting other people in
wrestling in their minds and things. Yeah.
I think that's the only close to.
Yeah, you're right. There were a couple of instances of that, but I mean, you look at episode 3 of The Deadly Assassin, and it's just it's on another level. I mean, it is like no other episode of Doctor Who in the entire 60-odd year run. There's nothing like episode 3 of The Deadly Assassin.
Unsurprisingly, there's lots of fans of this era in the live chat, far fewer fans of the late Mary Whitehouse, Charlotte.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think as well, it was how layered and complex the characters were. I think if you look at something like Morbius, and you think about, that's just one character. You don't see him in anything before, so you only have that story to sort of learn about him. And he's such this complex mess. He's sort of a beautiful mess of a character that you can see you can see how he's got to where he is, why he's that crazy because of what has happened to him. But then he's still a villain. There's no making him out to be the good guy, but you can understand how he's got there. And I think it's such an easy thing for writers to fall into, I feel like, especially now, that they have these really complex, dark characters and they almost by the end want to make them the good guy. And I feel like in every single story with the villain, yes, they've got layers. They're not just like cackling villains, but they always knew they're still morally not very good people, or they're still at in some cases incredibly morally corrupt. But you can see the steps, and I find that more interesting in a villain than one that's meant to be this horrible villain, but then at the end you tell me I'm meant to feel sorry for them, or I'm meant to sort of understand that they're not really that bad. It's like, no, they're a villain. They're horrible. So that's what also I love about the characters.
There's nothing that bores 9-year-olds more than that. You can do it once every 2 or 3 years at the most. You can't do it three or four times a season or every film of a series. Yeah, it's overplayed a lot now. Domgo says they seem to know the sweet point of terrifying kids, but not so much as to chase them away. Well, you send them behind the sofa. So it's that wonderful middle ground. Daryl Joyce says it was good. They do. We all loved it at the time. I loved it.
If I didn't want to watch something on, like, it was with Doctor Who or any other, because I used to watch a lot of horror when I was like 4 years old. if I didn't want to watch it, I would just close my eyes. I could hear everything happening, but I'd just close my eyes because
That's sometimes worse.
well, it is because it was. But it's those sort of things that you remember watching, and it's imprinted in your brain, and that's And the best thing about Holmes and Hinchcliffe was that they didn't go into it expecting them to make their mark on the show.
No, not at all.
None of the earlier ones wanted to make a mark on the show. They just wanted to make good programs.
Make it well.
Totally.
And my goodness, they did it. As far as I'm concerned, they did it, and it's actually left an indelible mark in Doctor Who. And even the writers today are copying what they can, to try and try and
certainly returning to it to try and mine for something that they're finding elusive within their own sort of skill set. Daryl Joyce says it's right, confidence on the part of Robert Holmes and Philip Hinchcliffe. Sadly, a lack of confidence on the part of the BBC when they moved him on. The BBC started to cave into pressure. I mean, is this?
They do that a lot, don't they? The BBC.
You see, on one hand, it just as it is now, although things are changing, it's public money now. It was public money then, but Doctor Who was phenomenally popular at the time, as you said, Simon. This is 10 million viewers. Practically per episode. It wasn't unusual for the show to be pulling down those sorts of numbers. But yeah, the Deadly Assassin though did get it unstuck, didn't it?
Yeah.
This doesn't overshadow Philip Hinchcliffe's time on the show, does it? But it does.
No, not in the
But when you watch the era back, you're aware, if not that a handbrake turn takes place, it does seem like something drastic has happened. And so there's a kind of tragedy with a small t that the thing didn't creatively reach the crescendo that they were clearly taking it to, that somebody else intervened.
It is a tragedy that I think it's undoubtedly the case that we were robbed of a fourth Hinchcliffe-Holmes season because of that one scene in The Deadly Assassin. I think that's reasonable point. Basically, the BBC had been coming under a lot of pressure from Mary Whitehouse throughout the Hinchcliffe-Holmes era, but the BBC had always backed their production team, always backed them, until this moment in The Deadly Assassin where the BBC Director General at the time, Charles Curran, publicly apologized to Mary Whitehouse, sent it was an official apology, and basically said, I can't remember what the exact wording is, but I think Curran pretty much said, I think on this occasion we went too far. And so what they did is, whereas they backed Hinchcliffe and Holmes up until that point, unfortunately, they stopped backing them and they said, the production team actually went too far on this occasion.
Tiny concession.
Yeah, because Mary White basically accused the BBC of ignoring its own guidance. And the BBC guidance, as I know, as somebody who's gone through it, is very, very stringent about what you can and can't do. And so, to be fair, Mary Whitehouse had got a point, but it's debatable as to whether they went too far, and they did actually contravene the guidance or not. But the BBC at the time decided that they'd fought with Mary Whitehouse enough, and so they were going to. I think it would be unfair to say that they threw Hinchcliffe and Holmes under the bus, but they certainly didn't back them. And then immediately after that, it was pretty much agreed that that Hinchcliffe would be moving on onto a new territory.
Because the character of Leela hadn't gone down very well, had it, with that crowd. They didn't
really like the knife.
They were really wound up by this, but somehow I think maybe it was down to Louise Jameson's performance. I don't know. They seemed to back off with that, but eventually, when it came to the deadly assassin. It was just too much. And I wouldn't say that Hinchcliffe was carpeted, but he was moved on with haste, wasn't he? With relative haste.
Yeah, unfortunately he was, and ironically he was literally swapped with Graham Williams. Graham Williams was setting up the drama series Targets, which was the BBC's replacement for the Sweeney. And so, and it literally, they swapped seats. As I recall, I think Philip Hinchcliffe wasn't even really aware that he was being moved on until Williams just arrived and said, "I'm your replacement." I could be wrong on that, but I think it wasn't a million miles off that, to be honest. So they literally just swapped their seats, and Hinchcliffe moved on to produce Target that Graham Williams had set up, and Target was a very, very hard-hitting police procedural drama series. So Hinchcliffe was perfect for the role, but it's just a tragedy that we were robbed of that 4th season of Hinchcliffe and Holmes, because you look at season 12 is good, season 13 is amazing, season 14 is incredible. What would they have done with season 15? I mean, you wonder whether maybe they would have dropped the ball, and actually it wouldn't have worked so well, and we wouldn't look back on the era so fondly now. It would be
Hinchcliffe being consummate. He made a great success of Target, didn't he, in 1977. Two seasons of this show, led by Patrick Mower, and just these pictures up on screen, we can see several Doctor Who guest actors. Just here alone, there's Philip Maddock, look, and there's Ron Pember, and there's
Christopher Benjamin,
and there's yeah, there they all are.
There you go.
So again, that professionalism. Hinchcliffe was still a young man. It's quite a big launch of a show, front cover of the Radio Times, which they never gave to Doctor Who back then. So, he seized that day as well, and went on to great success with a show called Private Schultz in 1981, which I think was the big break for Michael Elphick, and then set up Taggart on Scottish TV. It was a Scottish
Taggart.
show, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I've got to say though, what you're talking about being professional, it says a lot that he basically lost his job off what you've just said, or he got pushed, or he got sort of shoved on, however you want to phrase it, and then he came back to Doctor Who, that he was willing to come back or carry on being like now. He's probably one of the most visible classic producers now, that still does interviews, that goes to conventions, that sort of still loves to talk about this show. And that what happened with The Deadly Assassin and the BBC's sort of treatment of him never made him be sour or sort of have ill feelings towards the brand. He still clearly loves this show, and so that's also, I think, a testament to him as a person.
Yeah, okay, but that's just TV, isn't it? I think is a part of it. If you're going to be in that industry, you've got to accept that it's going to be cutthroat, and you cannot take it personally.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying, because he could have, and people have in the past have, and I think he probably would have had a lot of reason too. If you're doing that much, if you get the show to that point, and you get that much success, like we were talking about, and then for it in one sort of sweep to say no, you're going on something else.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying it shows his professionalism.
Yes.
And how, this just sort of happens. And well, look at us now. We were with him 2 months ago. Just shows it.
I had a very brief exchange with Philip Hinchcliffe as well, and of course he is instantly recognisable. I can't believe it when I found out he was 80. Because he just seemed still a very formidable man, very, very present, very clear. So it was the briefest of exchanges, but he came into the room, asked a question, I answered it, and afterwards just like, that was Philip Hinchcliffe. Oh wow. It was as simple as that.
He's very, very charming. He's very avuncular. He's very quietly spoken. He's very focused. He's a cool character, Philip Hinchcliffe.
Cool. That was the word. He was just really cool.
Yes. He is cool, and he's clearly intelligent. He just exudes. He's the kind of person. and sadly, not all people that work on Doctor Who are like this. He's the kind of person who doesn't need to shout about anything that he's doing. He doesn't need to be big-mouthed about it or bragging about it. As I say, his question back to me was almost an expression of, was it the best Doctor Who? Okay, I'm not sure that it was. Very, very humbling and self-effacing. Just quietly confident that, no, I think he probably thinks, yeah, I did an okay job there. But there's, as you said earlier, Shard, just no ego whatsoever. Just a very, very cool customer.
He remained in television for years, decades after he finished on Doctor Who. That really must say something for the general talent, Matt, and the tenacity of staying in that sector. Oh, I mean, yeah, success after success helps. It would have been choosing the people that he worked with quite carefully as well, I suppose.
I think, I mean, he went on to executive produce, because he moved up from being a producer to executive producer. So he ended up right at sort of, about as high as he could go. And he produced 21 more shows, quite, long running shows. So he absolutely, he made his mark, and he stayed there, and he stayed the course. And I can't help thinking that being at the helm during what was recognised by the industry and by the public as the golden era of Doctor Who, it's not going to have done him any harm. I genuinely don't think it will have done him any harm in his career.
Unsurprisingly, people are trading their memories of their favourite cliffhangers of the Tom Baker era in its entirety in the live chat, but particularly the ones on Philip Hinchcliffe's watch, which undoubtedly turned Tom Baker into a huge national hero, international hero, really, I suppose. The way the show travelled, here he is with a bunch of children there, putting his hat. That was his signature move, as I understand. When he met school kids, he sort of popped the hat on their heads like that. Cybermat Strikes is in the live chat on YouTube and says, Hinchcliffe-Holmes builds compelling worlds throughout season 12, with the TARDIS largely mothballed, and UNIT feels like it's there right the way through his era, even though it's not. It's very clever. I suppose it does, when you look back, when you reflect. Yeah, because
UNIT is only literally a couple of stories, but actually, you feel that their presence is still there, and you don't feel that they're sort of being jettisoned rudely by the production team at all.
Kids love being scared, says David Jenkins. Any argument here?
None at all.
Me.
None at all.
We've got Ian David Deers in the live chat as well there, and he says it is one of the best eras in Doctor Who history. Tom was the best Doctor. Kids love being scared. Of course they do. Of course they do, Ian. Hope you've had a good evening, mate. Bonjour, says Bunch of Wallis.
Bonjour.
Can't say much further than that, can you? And we've got fans of various different stories, all airing their differences here and splitting hairs. Who would be the modern day equivalent of Mary Whitehouse? Asks Andrew Gareth Dick. Who is the one that's sort of policing? I don't think we'd better get into that, Andrew. But we could probably assemble a shortlist there for a Type 40 extra. That could be a bit of a laugh. Darren Wilshaw says, I was 5 years old during season 13, and the scenes in episode 3 of The Deadly Assassin stayed with me for years after. Probably my most eagerly awaited VHS release. So that was it, wasn't it? The memories would stay with you, and then these stories would eventually trickle out onto home media, and you'd find out whether the memory really had cheated or not, as J&T had suggested. I won't say insisted, had suggested.
But he was wrong on that occasion. J&T was wrong. The memory had not cheated.
He was.
Did it actually get released on the VHS? Did it get released uncut, or did they just ever release it cut from then on The Deadly Assassin?
As I recall, at the time it was released on VHS, I think it was cut, but I'm confident that was because at that point they hadn't got back the missing 3 or 4 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Because the missing 3 or 4 seconds were found on somebody's VHS recording from original transmission. So I think it was cut on the original VHS release, Matt, but somebody will know that. Correct me in the chat.
I think there was. That does sound familiar now. Peter Harrington asks, didn't his daughter go into television? Yeah, Philip Hinchcliffe's daughter has gone into television. Selena Hinchcliffe, she's a TV presenter, primarily on sports channels for like Sky Sports and things like that. But she has worked for the BBC and ITV as well. I saw a picture of her while we were putting the show together, and I thought, oh, it's her. It's that woman. Yeah. So yeah, she is. She's very, very successful. What a lovely photo of Philip, Tom, and Louise. Says Stephen Brady. Yeah, it's a nice one, isn't it? That
I didn't realise he was he was as tall as Tom.
Yeah, he's a tall bloke.
He's very
Tall and cool.
A lot of people could take a leaf out of his book, suggests Frank Cronogue.
Should take a leaf out of his book, Frank.
Can't argue with
that.
Can't argue with that. But yes, Philip Hinchcliffe's era, his time as producer of Doctor Who, absolutely. He was lightning in the bottle. I don't know. I think this man was just simply too good and too right at the right time. He'd got the ultimate Doctor Who, many would argue, in Tom Baker there, put them together. You'd already got a guaranteed hit, but with Robert Holmes and everybody else involved too, well, I don't think any other show on television really stood much of a chance, did it? Let us know your favourite Hinchcliffe story there in the comments section as well. Your favourite story, your favourite cliffhanger, and what do you think Hinchcliffe did better than anybody else? I mean, we're taking it as read here that Hinchcliffe is your favourite. It's that question, isn't it? So, what is your favourite era of production on Doctor Who, and why is it Philip Hinchcliffe's? It's that kind of meme. We just assume. But I think it is the majority of people's favourites, even now, all these decades on. And certainly, I mean, I think I've said to you before, Simon, when I was growing up as a Doctor Who fan and the series was in the shadow of Tom Baker, and this exact time, I used to get frustrated that people lamented it so much. Because I was enjoying the stuff we were getting then in the 80s. But when I saw these stories, I had to.
You clocked it.
When they came out on VHS and I finally got to see them, I thought, oh, okay.
I get it now.
You win. This is very much Doctor Who at the height of its powers in the classic time. But we want your memories, we want your opinions, and we want your top threes there in the comment section. Hit it with us, all in celebration of Philip Hinchcliffe's 80th birthday. Would you believe it? And yes, he's in the time since. Yeah, you're quite right, Charlotte. I mean, he hasn't ever distanced himself from Doctor Who, despite the huge successes and the consistent career in television. We've seen his name on Target Books, and even now he's putting out work with Big Finish, conceiving new ideas or going back to ideas that never made it to television back then in the 70s. And reworking those, working alongside writers like Mark Platt and old cohorts like Louise Jameson and Tom Baker. So all that stuff is very much out there, as are the Target books. I always find it a little bit curious when I see Philip Hinchcliffe's name on a Target adaptation of The Keys of Marinus. Bit random, but there it is. There it is nonetheless. And just this month has seen the publication too of this title, this long-awaited book, The DNA of Doctor Who, the Philip Hinchcliffe years. Much long awaited. This, I understand that copies are now making their way to backers, because this was a Kickstarter campaign, wasn't it, through our friend Gareth Kavanagh. So if you have got this book and all its various extras and things like that, let us know how worth the wait was it. We know it was probably going to be worth the wait. Let us know what you think of the book, and as well as all the Philip Hinchcliffe stuff as well from way back in the day. Yeah, the pictures like this are very wholesome, aren't they, Simon? You see the old gang back together there.
Mm-hmm. They're just gold, Dan. They're just gold. This takes me to my happy place. There are two of my absolutely cast iron heroes on screen at the moment. Tom Baker 100% is my number one hero, but Philip Hinchcliffe, I didn't know at the time that he was a hero, but he undoubtedly is a hero. I admire this man more than I can tell you, because I grew up with this stuff. It shaped me into the person I am. It takes me back to my happy place. I watch any Philip Hinchcliffe story. It does, Char. It takes me back to my happy place. I'd happily just go back there.
But you can hear it. Char, you can hear it in his voice, can't you? In Simon's voice.
That's what's really sweet about it. It's just this silly little show, but that the happiness it brings to people is there. It's very good. Yeah, I love it.
Totally.
And it's not just like the happiness when you first watch it. And I think we've all got that, whether it's a doctor, a writer, an actor. That happiness, it's like we contain it in ourselves and it never quite goes away.
Yeah.
And we can just tap into it whenever we go, whether that's watching or reading or listening. And I think that just shows that these writers, when they're writing these scripts, I think especially in classic, we've spoken about this before, because it wasn't the age of the media like it is now. He had no idea how much they were going to travel and how much fans were going to remember. And they 20, 30 years later, or even more, meet him at conventions like Simon did and say, you were my favourite Doctor Who. And I just think that's what's special about this show, that we keep that. And that's what fandom is a lot for me now.
We want your comments. We want your countdowns, your top threes, your favourite moments and cliffhangers. And favourite books and audios too. Everything that Philip Hinchcliffe has given us as Doctor Who fans over these, 5 decades. What a contribution. What a man. What a career.